Some of my favorite games like Dwarf Fortress, RimWorld, Stellaris, and Crusader Kings 2 all have procedurally generated or randomly selected character names. In this short tutorial series, I'll show you how to work with text through generating random employees for this goofy company database. We'll first start with generating random names from lists of silly strings, and in the next video, I'll cover how to get data from Google Spreadsheets, CSV files, into Unity. That's how we'll make these job titles. And finally, in the third video, I'll go over getting info, in this case, images from a website. The employee faces are actually AI generated. They come from the website thispersondoesnotexist.com. So we're actually getting a completely new face from there every time we click in Unity. Because I'm doing this processing kind of effect with shader graph, I'm using Universal Render Pipeline. If you are using my project package, you'll want to import it into an ERP project. You can see that option in the Unity Hub. First, you need to go to the package manager and import TextMesh Pro. You can read about what TextMesh Pro is here. And if you use the ERP template, it will already have shader graph installed. After you've installed Bolt in the Bolt setup, here's everything I've added. To just work with text, you'll only need TextMesh Pro, but I have things related to shader graph, the web request, and storing images from the web request. So if you follow along with each of the videos, it's probably best to just add them all now. For type options, similarly, TextMesh Pro UGUI and TextMesh Pro are most important. But if you want your names to generate with random faces, you'll need the web request, request for texture, and all these other things. Okay, click Generate, and let's make some fun characters. Right-click in the hierarchy and create a new empty object and call it Name Generator. Click Add Component and add a flow machine and call it Character Name Generator. Right-click on the hierarchy and select UI and TextMesh Pro. And then, since it's the first time we've added a TextMesh Pro thing, we need to import these TMP essentials. Then I'm going to click on this 2D button to switch to 2D mode and zoom out. And then I just want to have one color in the world. So I'm going to go up to icon, I'm not sure what it is, toggle skybox. I'm going to turn the skybox off. And if you're new to Unity, if you want to change this, it's in Preferences, Colors, Scene, Background. You can change the color right there. And I'm going to copy the hexadecimal and then paste it for the background for the camera. So on the main camera, I'll scroll down, and then in Environment, in background type, you can change that to solid color. And I already have the color there. You could paste your hexadecimal value in there. I don't think the alpha matters. Okay, and then that'll be in the background in the game view. So let's rename this text TMP object. I'll call it Character Name Text Mesh Object, so it's absolutely clear what it is. And next, I'll center it on the screen and press F to center on it. Increase the width and height to about 800 by 100. I'll increase the font size, center, align it. I'm actually going to increase the font size a little bit more to 100. And then I'll put it in the middle, in the center of the text container. And then I'm right-clicking to make a folder for fonts. It's easy to import fonts. Just drag a font into your project folder and then go to Window, TextMesh Pro, and Font Asset Creator. There you can select a source font file. I'll select that Mintel font that I just dragged in. I'll include a link below to info on these different render modes. You'll probably want to use SDF most of the time, but since we have a pixelated font here, I'm going to use Raster Hinted, and then click Generate Font Atlas, and then save it. And I already have saved it, so I'm going to save over the last one. Then on the TextMesh Pro component on the character name text mesh object, you click on the dot by the font asset, and you can select your font. Okay, so I want to separate the font generator from the text displaying it. As you can see in the final project, the name generator, title generator, and face generator are all separated out from the canvas elements. It makes it really easy to see where the scripts are, and then you can look at the scripts and see what the scripts are controlling. If something breaks, you know right where to go. The first thing the generator should do is get the TextMesh Pro UI component from the character name TextMesh object. That way we can set the text right here on the generator. Before I start in on the graph, I'm going to go up to Window and bring in the Graph Inspector and bring in the Variables window. Okay, so I'll start by making an object variable called character name TextMesh object of type GameObject. And let's drag in the TextMesh Pro object. Then right-click on the graph building area and type GameObject get component. And we want GameObject get component type. And we'll connect that up to start, because on start, we want to get the TextMesh Pro component from this character name TextMesh object. So the type of component we want to get is TextMesh Pro UGUI, not TextMesh Pro, but this second one here. Okay, so we're getting the component from this character name TextMesh object, and let's save the component as a variable. So I'll call it character name. I'm going to give this a really long name, TextMesh Pro UGUI component. All right, so I'm going to hold Alt and drag that variable out. That makes a set variable, and we're going to set the TextMesh Pro UGUI component to this variable. The type of the variable is null now, but when the game starts, the variable will change to type TextMesh Pro UGUI. Okay, so to generate a new employee, let's make it so that it just happens when you click on the screen. So get a on-mouse input unit. And to start, let's change the text. I wanted it to seem like the computer is searching through the database. So on-mouse input, let's set our text. So type TextMesh Pro and then type set text. And we want the UGUI set text. And in the text string field, put processing or some other word that you want to display when we're faking that the computer is searching or thinking of an employee. The unit is yellow now because there is not a TextMesh Pro object on self on this name generator object we have. Let's get the component we've saved from the character name object and connect that up. The unit is orange because there's no type or data for this variable. That's going to happen on start, so that's totally fine that this is orange right now. So this project is basically a joke. It's supposed to be funny, and a big part of humor is the pacing, creating tension and then resolving it. So let's get a wait unit so this processing message is on screen a little bit before we get the silly name. Whenever we say to our flow, hey, hold up a second, we are also saying go do something else and come back. And to say that, we need to go to our event and put that it is a coroutine. So after 2 seconds, the computer will come back and will generate the names. Let's start with a 2-part generation for the first and the last name. What I mean is William Son. So that would be 2 parts, 1 part William and the other part Son, or it could be flipped like Son William. Let's create a graph variable for our parts. So type name generation parts list. This is going to be a list of parts, and it will be an AOT list. AOT stands for ahead of time. Some platforms, like mobile phones, can't generate code at runtime, so AOT lists happen before the game is running. And a benefit here for AOT lists is we can get the count for how big the list is. So I've typed list get count, AOT list get count. That is going to get the size of our list. And the list that we want to get the size of is the name generation parts list. We'll make the name parts in the moment. It'll be more fun to set all this up first and then come up with all the name parts. Okay, so why do we need the count? Well, because get a random range unit, and this is important. You want the second one, the one with integer, and not the one with float, because that's going to give us decimal values. We want to pick a random item from anywhere in our name part list. So read the random range unit, and you can see that the max is exclusive. That means that that number in max won't be a number that is picked. All right, so I'm going to do this with paper. I just think it's a little bit easier to visualize. So let's say we have 2 items. The items are going to be indexed at 0 and 1 on our list. Now, our count is actually going to be 2, 1, 2. When we put it into the random range, the count of the list is naturally going to be the exclusive max. So the random range is going to pick between 0 and 1. Random range is going to churn out a number, and that number will be what we use to get an item from our list. So type get item and get the get list item unit and plug the connection into that for the index. Then we need to tell this unit what list we want to get an item from. Let's store this item as a string, so make a graph variable and call it generated first name. And this variable is going to be of type string, and then I'm going to hold Alt and drag in the variable to get a set variable unit, and then I'll connect it up to the get item and connect up the flow. Now we have the first part of the name, the William part of Williamson. I'm selecting everything and then pressing Control-C and Control-V to paste it, because we want to do the same thing for the second part, the son part of the Williamson. So I'll connect up the flow to this, and rather than do this vertically, I'm going to make it more horizontal, because this is all going to be the first name. So we got one part of the name and saved it to this generated first name variable. So I'm going to delete that here, because what we want to do now is get the second part of the name and add it to the first part. That is, in the Williamson example, we're getting the random son and we're adding it to the end of William. To combine strings, that's called concatenate. Concatenate specifically means putting the string at the end of the other string. The con prefix here, in this case, means together, like congregate or construct, and caten means chain. Maybe you could use 10 cats to remember the meaning of this word. So let's 10-cat-enate the first part of this word with the second part. I'll right-click, add a new unit, and type concat. And then we want string concat with 2 arguments, argument 0 and argument 1. I'll connect up the random range, and the first argument will be that first part of the name that we got and saved to generated first name. So I'll connect that up. And then we are getting the second part of the name. So now the 2 parts are together. We have our Williamson. I'm going to hold Alt and drag in the generated first name. And then I'm going to set the name constructed to the generated first name. So when we get it the first time, it's just the first part. Then we put the first part and the second part together, and we set it to that generated first name variable. So for a brief, tiny moment, it is just the first part of the name, and then it's both parts together. If you're really new to programming, I'll say it a slightly different way. It's like we have William in a basket called generated first name. We pick up William, we add son to it, and then we put it back into that same basket. And I'm just doing this to have a shorter list of variables. We're going to make the last name the same way we made the first name. So I'm going to select everything after the wait unit and copy and paste it, Control-C, Control-V. And then I'll make a variable called generated last name of type string. And then zoom in on the graph. We're going to use that same name generation parts list, and we'll set generated last name here and generated last name right here. And then set it to generated last name. Okay, since the graph is getting kind of big, let's group this up. So I'm going to hold Control and left click drag and call this first name from parts, and then this one will be last name from parts. Rather than have a long flow, let's put in a sequence node so that after the first flow happens, it will move down to the next. So I'll type sequence, and there it is. Then I'll plug the weight into here. You can have multiple steps if you want. So first we'll get the first name and then the last name. Then let's concatenate the first name and the last name. And so I'm going to add a step to this sequence node. So we have 3 steps. We'll get the first name and then the last name, and then we'll put the first and the last name together with a space in the middle. Right click, add a unit, and let's get concat. And this time we'll get 3 arguments. We'll get the first name for argument 0, the last name for argument 2, and then add a unit, get a string literal unit, and then on the string literal unit, you can plug that into argument 1 and just press space. Then I'll go up to the sequence unit and get the flow. All right, let's make a variable for the generated name. So I'll call it generated name, and that'll be of type string. I'll hold Alt and drag that in to set this 3-argument concat to the generated name. And then finally, let's set this string to the text on the Text Mesh Pro component. So add a unit and type Text Mesh Pro set text. This time I'm actually going to try and hunt it down. So I'll go into UGUI and scroll all the way down to set text. Okay, there it is. Set text. Oh, okay, you can concatenate with text mesh. That's cool. Okay, and then I'll connect that up and connect the generated name right there. And then that's yellow. We need to get the Text Mesh Pro UGUI component. And then, so I'll just bring that in as a get variable and connect it up. Now, our list of parts is going to be all lowercase, so we can have parts both in the beginning and in the second half. So we need to capitalize the first letter of the first name and the first letter of the last name. I'm going to the end of the first name graph. So get a string substring unit. Substrings are strings from strings. And we want the start index and length. I'll connect up the flow and connect the generated first name into the string. And we want to, from the start, just get 1 letter. So the length will be 1, and then get a string to upper unit because we want to capitalize that first letter. So I'll connect all that up. And then we'll concatenate the capitalized letter. So I'll get string concat with 2 arguments. The first argument will be the capital letter of the first name. And then the second argument will be another substring. I'll type string, substring, and then we can just get the start index for this one because we don't really know the length. We just want to add the capital letter to all the other letters. That means we want this substring to start at 1, which is the second letter. And we want to get the second letter on from the generated first name. And just like we did before, we're going to set all this again to that variable. So go to the Graph tab and hold Alt and drag in the generated first name to get a set variable unit, and then connect up the value. So now we have a capitalized first name. So then I'm going to copy and paste all this to the last name. I'll connect that up, and then let's just switch the variable here from generated first name to generated last name. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of organization at the bottom here and hold Control and group this up as assemble name and set Text Mesh Pro text. And now finally, the fun part. In your name generation parts list, make a type string and put some fun words down that you like. So I'll do fuzz. And then you can right click here and select duplicate. So you don't have to keep setting the type. Bum, 10, cat, tiggle, forp. You get the idea. Sunberry, loo, whoop, cumber. I'll add some more silly words. All right, let's try this out. Now, when you click on the screen, you're going to get names. Oh, okay. So I need to resize the text box. I'm sorry, Sunshine Cumbercat. There's been an error in the system. I won't be able to get you your Social Security check. If you could come back in about 3 or 4 months, we'll probably have this all straightened out. Okay, so I'll make it about like 1080 by 500. Okay, cool. Let's try this out. Okay, yeah, everything is working. Now, I'm going to show you a trick for adding a lot more variety to these names, because it gets pretty obvious after a while that there's a 2-part construction going on. But what we can do is have it randomly pick between a names list that we've pre-composed and these constructed names that we're putting together with 2 parts. I'll go to the top here and make some space because we're going to need to cut in on the flow. So let's head to where the sequence node is, and then let's do a roll. Again, we want the random range integer, that second one, not the float one. And for now, we'll just have it be a coin flip. So that means that the flip can be 0 or 1. So the max should be 2. 2 can't be pick. And then get an integer equals unit. This is like we're calling heads or tails. So let's check if it's equal to 1. And then right click and get a branch unit. If our roll is 0, not 1, then the branch will go false and we'll make a name from our list of name parts. If we roll 1 and it branches to true, we're going to get a name from a list of first names. Let's make a variable for a list of first names. So we'll call it first name list and make it of type AOT list. And then I'll bring in the list. So let's find out how long the list is. So AOT list get count. And then we bring that into the max of the random range. So I'm just going to Control D, duplicate the random range. And then we're going to get an item from the random number that we get. Then we need to set the first name variable to the name that we got from the random index. And in the first name list, let's add some cool first names. So I'll add Jim and James. That's a good one. Jimbo. But there's no need to only put serious cool names in here. You could also add names like Bumpy, Doc, Momo, Peach in Japanese, Grendel. There's a lot of fun ways to come up with words. Like you could look up funniest, weirdest, trickiest words in other languages, like Smulfspark.
Smulfispak.
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 Or you can look up baby names, historical surnames, pet names are really fun too. Okay, so the first names are working. Let's do the same thing for a last name list. Okay, let's see here. So I'm going to move all this up. And then I'll copy and paste the random range roll. And then I'll grab the graph for getting the pre-composed names from a list. And instead of the first name list, this is going to get last names from a last name list. And then false will go to the name construction. So I'll make a variable for an AOT list called last name list of type AOT list. Then I'll put in some last names, Trout, Wabbit, and Danger. Then we need to switch the variable from first name list to last name list and from generated first name to generated last name. And then I'll group all this up so it's organized for you guys. first name precomposed for this, and this will be last name precomposed. And I'll make these groups a different color. It's a little bit easier to read. Okay, great. And let's test it to make sure these precomposed names work. James Shortfuzz, Cat's in Danger, so Danger works. Doc Wabbit, Wabbit works. And we're getting both the constructed and the precomposed. What Pam's Bum Flip, that was a good one. And of course, you can change the delay if you just want to click through names real fast. All right, that about does it. Thanks for watching, guys. My name is Forp Cumber Dingberry, and in the next video, I'll get into getting data from spreadsheets. Doesn't that sound fun? All right, see ya.